Hello, it's MrLEDiecast and we're back. And in this video, we're going to be looking at some of the Matchbox cars, the Model A's and the Model T's. I will be right back and we'll get started. We're back and we'll start with these Model T's. There's a bunch of these, and that's why I wanted to make a video on them. If you've been watching, you know I really like to collect the super fast cars and the cars from the 90s from Matchbox. The Lesney cars are a little out of my price range, so when they come in I get very excited. But I tend to focus on the super fast cars and the Universal era type cars. But we get a lot of these Model T's that come and go. And I didn't know much about them. I just figured there was a whole bunch of variations on them. And I knew that they were used for promotions quite a bit by Matchbox. But it wasn't until they started showing up in my videos and I started kind of getting a hardcore group of people asking me if they could buy them, that I figured out that some people just collect these. There's over 500 castings of this Model T Ford. And that's crazy. I mean, if you've got any books about Matchbox cars, look up the Model T, and there are 500 or more, probably closer to 600 variations on this particular model. So I can see why you might only collect these. That's a pretty sizable collection. Most of them aren't worth too much. There's a few that are prized. But also a few other things about it. It's a 152 scale. It's not a 164 scale car like we would come to expect, but a 152 scale. These were not big cars, and if I get a regular car in here, they are not that big. They would be much, much smaller and maybe about half the size of this car normally. So, also called Tin Lizzies. These cars made by Ford Motor Company, and obviously the Model T. The history of the Model T is pretty well known. The cars that I've got here, this Goodyear car, this is pretty common for these. This was another one of the promotional type cars that we would see. They also were part of the different series. This is the Michigan car, which was part of the, if I can remember what it's called, I think it was the 50th birthday series, Matchbox Across America. And each state got a car. So Michigan got the Model A, which makes perfect sense, being Michigan and Detroit, where Ford started. So it's also got just a little bit of trivia here. It was the 27th, no, that's not right, 26th car in this series. And so its license that it would have shipped with came with, I think it was something like MI026 for the 26th state. So these cars came with little license plates for that birthday series, but that's one of my favorites that I have. We've also got these promotional cars. There's Corn Pops, Apple Jacks. The Corn Pop one, or the Birds one, is a bit of a mystery to me. I just didn't get a chance to look it up. But the Corn Pops and the Apple Jacks ones were part of a mail-away promotion by Kellogg's. There was 4. I know there was an Eggo and a something else, and now I'm not remembering. Or maybe that's not correct. Wait a second. That was the Model T. Sorry. Ignore that. So, yeah, by the way, the blue one you saw was supposedly part of the main lines. 1993 was that blue Goodyear car. So, but we've got a lot of these. Most of them are kind of beat up. They've got these very thin plastic tires on them, so if anybody plays with them too hard, they tend to get pretty beat up. They've also got a great big plastic windshield on them that tends to pop out if that top gets crushed. So they're kind of delicate. If you're buying them, always check the little headlights on the front. You'll see these 3 have various states of headlight use. This guy's headlights are broken completely off. That's missing one, and that one has all of them. So those headlights come off on these very easily and get broken off. So moving over to the Model A's, if you're keeping track, the Model A came after the Model T. Here's one. We'll take a look at him. And Model A Ford, this one comes in a truck and a car. Here's the car and here's the truck. The front part of them is exactly the same, and then just this back piece here is swapped out for those back windows. So there's a truck and there's a car. The truck has over 500 castings. Did I say this one? I think I got that mixed up. Yeah, redo that. The Model T has over 200 castings. That guy's over 200. This one's over 500. I think I got it screwed up. But mostly promos, so a lot of people collecting those. NFL, company promotions, car products, all of them have some sort of promotion with these. So there are, if we get the mail away cars in here, those are the ones I got mixed up with the others. I've got some of them. There we go. So we've got some mail away cars with these. This is the frosted mini wheats, Rice Krispies, and the Raisin Bran. These came with an Eggo car, and that was part of a 4-pack mail away that you could go order. So like I mentioned, the Model A followed the Model T. The Model A is also called an A-bone, and that has something to do with the way that the structure of the chassis is built. The cost on these, the Model A was only about $400 when it came out as a base model, but it came out after the Model T. The Model T was in production for a long time, something like late 1908, 1910, all the way through the 20s. And the Ford wanted to make an affordable car. Here, let's get one of those in here. Ford wanted to make an affordable car for that. So this was kind of what he came up with. It was very utilitarian. The styling wasn't very great on it. It didn't do a whole lot. It probably had about the same amount of power as your lawnmower does today, if not less. But the normal person, the average American, could actually afford that car. And of course, it became very popular. Everybody knows their history. Sold about 15 million of these. So at one point, obviously, it was the car that was the most seen car on the road. One interesting thing about these is most people remember these as being black. Once they hit their heyday, probably about 1915, they were all black. Ford, his famous quote was something like, any customer can have a car painted any color as they want as long as it's black. But that wasn't the originals. The originals came out in a few different colors. Green, gray, blue. I think there was a red for the first few years that these were out. And it wasn't until the production really was exploding for Ford, and he was really right in the middle of the heyday of the Model T, that he switched it over to being black. Now, those other colors were more luxury-based models, but kind of interesting. I always remember them being black, but they weren't always black. So, and just a few prices on these. In 1909, when it came out, it was $850. In 1913, the price dropped to $550 for a base model of a Model T, and in 1915, it dropped to $440. So the price actually dropped, even though the popularity was soaring on these. So that was something different. Big part of American history is how Ford kind of molded his company. And he was really after making, like, everybody would have these cars. He was actually lowering the price as he went. The luxury models, of course, went up and up and up. With the Model A's, yeah, let's get a Model A in here. Remember, Model A followed the Model T. They were not in order of how you think about it. Let's look at some that we didn't see. Here's a Model A. So we didn't see this guy. But the Model A's, the A-bone, they didn't come in just black. They came in some other colors. 4 colors, I believe, with the luxury models were a few of those colors. They were around $400. Now, this is about 1928, 29, 30-ish when these came out. That was $400 for a base model. So This is almost 20 years after the Model A came out, and the price hadn't gone up. It had actually gone down because of the way they made these. They weren't handcrafted by a few people. There was production lines that made these things. Interesting thing about the production line is Ford knocked the production line model all the way down to just, it was something like 83 steps. And don't quote me on that. I don't remember if I'm right. But if you worked on the production line, you were part of one of those 83 steps. And so, of course, they could mass produce these. And it was really one of the first times we'd seen that at that level. Another thing that's interesting about the Model A is when they came out, Ford was dealing with a whole new kind of structure of government regulation on these. Of course, like anything, once something's popular, the government wants to tax it. And they were taxing it based off horsepower. And so that's what was considered luxury, was more horsepower. Keep in mind, horsepower back then was not exactly what we think of as horsepower now, but Ford would actually promote these as having less horsepower than they actually did because he wanted the tax to be lower on them. Nowadays, they would never do that. You'd probably pump up the numbers on horsepower to sell a car. Back then, Ford was actually trying to lower it. Ford and the government, yeah, not so chummy. Most of the styling on these was, going back to the Model A, most of the styling on this was done by Ford himself. Really, he was not big on styling. He felt that was extraneous and not needed. He was after that utilitarian feel. Whatever was needed was the only thing to put on it. Styling cost money, at least he thought. And it just wasn't what people wanted. People wanted a cheap car that worked. But on the Model A's, which of course grew into the 30s and the 40s with the Roadsters and all, the styling was controlled a little bit more by his son, who was Edsel. And that's the same as the Ford Edsel. His son later went on to be president of the company for a long time. But Edsel was very much more into the styling, and so you get a much more stylistic car than its predecessor was, which is good because, well, you just don't see too many of these as hot rods. In fact, you just don't see too many of these at all anymore. But this one has remained around as kind of the iconic look for Ford during the 30s and the 40s and the pre-war era. So yeah, so just a little bit about these cars. I'll give you a little bit of trivia on the way out. Did you know that going back to, was it a Model A? I don't remember. We'll call it both. I'm not a historian, so don't quote me in any of your thesis papers. But the wood scraps that were left over from the Ford manufacturing plant. Remember, a lot of these cars were made out of wood, a lot of the pieces. So there was a lot of scrap. And Ford, believing that, there's an economy model for everything kind of had a, you can make money off of the scraps somehow or another. He basically started his own charcoal company, and this scrap was part of the Ford charcoal company. So all this wood would be shipped over. They'd make charcoal out of it and sell charcoal. Well, charcoal back then was a big deal. This is before everybody had water heaters in their garage, and, gas-powered cars and everything just were new. So charcoal was a big deal. That was a big money-making deal. Well, that charcoal plant that was originally known as Ford Charcoal became Kingsford Charcoal. That I don't believe is owned by the Ford Motor Company anymore, but your Kingsford Charcoal that you use in your barbecue that company was originally started by Ford. So it's King Ford's Charcoal. Ta-da! Yeah, well, anyways. And again, don't quote me on any of it. I could be wrong on all of that. So I am not a car historian. So that just goes through kind of some of these Model A's and Model T's. I find them kind of fascinating because I think they show up in every single lot of cars that we get here. There's at least one, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about them. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.